I supported my family through everything, paid their debts, covered their bills, even funded my sister's baby shower. But when I showed up, they acted like I was a stranger. Then, in front of everyone, my own mother picked up a crystal candy jar and smashed it against my head. The people I loved watched me bleed and did nothing. And that's when I decided, if they could betray me like this, I'd show them what betrayal really looks like. Hi, my name is Brooke, and I'm 36 years old. I've spent the past 12 years working as a senior financial consultant at a private wealth firm in West Haven. I manage million-dollar portfolios for people who barely know the value of a dollar. The irony? I've spent my life giving everything I had to people who never valued me at all. That's what this story is about. You see, I was born into a family where love came with conditions, and loyalty always flowed in one direction, away from me. My younger sister, Megan, was the star. She could do no wrong. I was the one expected to have my act together at all times, so everyone else could fall apart safely around me. For years, I played that role perfectly. When Eric, my brother, got swallowed by a sports betting addiction in college and racked up $7,500 in debt, guess who covered it?
Me.
When our dad, Mark, lost his construction company and our parents' mortgage was on the brink of foreclosure, 6 months behind at $18,000, guess who stepped in?
Me.
When Megan decided she wanted a dream wedding complete with horse-drawn carriages and a custom crystal tiara that cost more than my first car, I wrote the check, $35,000 worth. She barely looked at me during the ceremony. Then came my mom, Patricia, wanting a new SUV. Her credit score was a disaster, so I co-signed the lease and covered the first few months, $4,800. She told me she'd handle the rest. She never did. Let's not forget the lake house. It's in my name, but they've treated it like a public resort, throwing parties, leaving it trashed, inviting their friends without telling me. I've spent over $6,000 on maintenance and repairs, while they never paid a dime. But I said nothing. I smiled. I told myself that family meant sacrifice. That maybe one day they'd see me for more than just their emergency fund. That maybe they'd love me without needing something in return. Then came the final straw. It was a Thursday afternoon when my phone rang. Mom's voice was syrupy sweet, too sweet to be real. Brooke, honey, Megan's baby shower is coming up. You know how much this means to her. We really want it to be perfect. I paused, staring at the client reports on my screen. I already knew where this was going, but I did what I always do. I sighed and said, "All right, just tell me what you need." 2 days later, I wired $12,000 to the event planner. Venue, catering, floral arches,
Custom desserts.
everything Megan wanted. I figured maybe this time I'd be seen. Maybe I'd get a seat at the table, literally. But then the message came. "Hey, Brooke, thanks for the contribution. Just wanted to let you know, we're keeping the guest list tight. You're not invited, but feel free to send a gift." I stared at my phone like the words were in a foreign language. Then, a second message. From Mom. "Honestly, Brooke, you can't buy your way into this family."
It wasn't anger I felt.
It was clarity, the kind that slices deep. I realized in that moment I was never really one of them. I was just the person they used when things got hard. Their financial crutch. Their silent helper. But not anymore. Because something inside me, something that had stayed quiet for too long, finally stood up and said, "Enough." I stared at my phone long after the screen went dark. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even text back. Instead, I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, looking around at the space I'd built entirely on my own. The polished floors, the framed diplomas, the glass shelves that held thank you notes from clients. Everything in this place whispered success and independence. Yet the people who should have been proud of me were the ones who shut the door in my face. I kept replaying the message. "You're not invited. Feel free to send a gift. You can't buy your way into this family." It didn't just hurt. It humiliated me. $12,000 wasn't a favor. It was a sacrifice. One they asked for with fake smiles and guilt-laced pleasantries. One they accepted without hesitation. And once they had it, They made it clear I was nothing more than a checkbook with a heartbeat.
For a few minutes, I felt paralyzed.
But then something shifted. I stood up.
Calm. Steady. Not broken, done.
I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and started pulling up account details. First, I called the event planner and asked for the final invoice. Then I checked the trust fund I had quietly started for Megan's unborn child, a gesture I hadn't even told her about yet. It was empty now, because I'd just removed my name from it and closed the account entirely. Next, I logged into my auto financing portal. I navigated to the luxury SUV my mother was driving. Yes, the one I co-signed for, and initiated a remote shutdown. Within minutes, the system confirmed. Vehicle. Access disabled due to unauthorized use. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt powerful, like I'd finally grabbed the steering wheel of my own life. I wasn't done. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Mr. Bennett. "Hi," I said, keeping my tone cool and composed. "I'd like to discuss selling the lake house." "Yes, the one under my name. I'm no longer interested in keeping it available for family use." He paused for a second, then replied, "Are we done with generosity then?" I smiled. "We are." That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. The city lights twinkled outside like tiny, silent fireworks, nothing like the explosions that were about to go off in my family group chat. I didn't have to wait long. By morning, my phone was vibrating off the table. Missed calls, angry texts, voicemails filled with accusations, guilt trips, and disbelief. But I ignored them. And then, just as I was settling into my work chair with coffee in hand, there was a knock at the door. No, the bang. I looked through the frosted glass panel beside the door and saw them. Megan and Patricia. Megan's arms were crossed, her expression seething. Patricia's face was flushed, equal parts panic and outrage. They looked like suburban zombies, furious, desperate, out of breath. I didn't rush. I took a long, deliberate sip of my coffee, then walked over and opened the door. Megan pushed past me like a storm in heels. "What the hell, Brooke?" she snapped. "Why did you cancel the SUV lease?" I was driving to my appointment, and it just shut down. The screen said, "Unauthorized use." What? Am I a thief now? I kept my tone even. "That's a feature," I said. "On high-end models. Remote shutdown." Mom stepped in behind her, voice sharp. "And why is the trust fund gone? You said you set it up for the baby. We were counting on that."
There it was.
They hadn't wanted me around for love. They'd wanted me for leverage. For money. I stood tall, crossed my arms, and said, "You made it clear I don't belong in this family." So I stopped pretending. And for the first time in my life, they were the ones left speechless. The silence between us didn't last long. Megan's face turned red, her eyes bouncing between me and our mother as if waiting for someone to fix the moment. Patricia, never one to accept being outmaneuvered, stepped forward and hissed, "You're being ridiculous, Brooke. Families go through things. This is just a misunderstanding." I tilted my head slightly, amused at her sudden shift in tone. The manipulation was almost impressive, almost.
"No, Mom.
What families don't do is take thousands of dollars from someone, cut them out, and then pretend it's just a communication issue." I could see the panic building behind their eyes. Megan opened her mouth to fire back, but I held up a hand. "Save it," I said, stepping aside and pointing toward the door. "You've made it clear what I mean to you. Now I'm doing the same." They stood frozen for a few more seconds, then stormed out, slamming the door behind them so hard a picture frame rattled on the wall. I watched from the window as they stood on my driveway, gesturing wildly at their phones, probably calling Dad or Eric, desperately trying to figure out how to regain control. But this time, there was nothing left to hold over me. Still, I knew they wouldn't let this go. They never did. And I was right. 2 days later, I received a text from Megan. "Just so you know, the baby shower is happening tomorrow at 3 p.m. Don't bother showing up. We don't want drama." That was the final spark I needed. I put my phone down, walked to my closet, and picked out a soft blue silk blouse and black heels. I curled my hair, kept my makeup minimal but sharp, and left with one thing in mind. If they wanted drama, I'd bring the truth. The baby shower was hosted at an upscale venue downtown. It was all fake smiles and floral arrangements, exactly Megan's taste. I walked in just as the small band finished a song, and heads turned almost immediately. Megan froze. Patricia looked like she'd seen a ghost. And my father, Mark, standing by the drinks table, looked horrified. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I simply stepped into the middle of the room and said clearly enough for everyone to hear. Good afternoon. I'm Brooke. I wasn't invited, but I helped pay for everything you're enjoying right now. Over $12,000 of it, in fact. Murmurs rippled through the room. Megan's friends shifted uncomfortably. One of them even turned off the live stream on her phone, then quickly turned it back on. I looked straight at my parents. I've paid your mortgage. I cleared Eric's debt. I funded Megan's wedding and this shower. And in return, I was told I didn't belong. Then, calmly and precisely, I began listing everything I was cutting off. The trust fund? Gone. The SUV lease? Cancelled. The lake house? For sale. And as of today, I'm no longer your financial safety net. I'm your past. The room went dead silent. That's when Patricia's lips tightened. She walked toward me slowly, her high heels tapping like warning shots on the tile floor. How dare you come here and humiliate us, she growled. After all we've done for you. All you've done is take, I snapped back. And I'm done letting you. The sound came out of nowhere. A loud crash, like the world breaking. Patricia had grabbed the crystal candy jar from the nearby gift table, the one I'd paid for, and before I could move, she brought it down hard. On my head, the glass shattered. A sharp, blinding pain bloomed at the top of my skull. I stumbled backward, hands clutching my hair as pieces of glass rained down onto the floor. Megan screamed. Someone gasped. The band stopped playing, and in the middle of the chaos, the live stream kept rolling, still broadcasting to dozens of viewers. Someone whispered behind me. Did she just hit her? Oh my God, call 911. I blinked through the pain and smiled bitterly. They thought this would be the end of me, but it was just the beginning. Blood trickled down the side of my face, warm and slow. For a moment, I couldn't hear anything except a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I could see people moving, but it was like watching them from underwater. Blurred shapes, frantic mouths, horrified eyes. Then I heard it. Oh my God, she's bleeding. Someone screamed. A glass fell and shattered. Guests were stumbling away from the scene, unsure whether to help or hide. I reached up, touching the spot where the crystal candy jar had hit me. My fingers came back wet and red. And yet I didn't cry. I stood straight. Across from me, Patricia's expression twisted, not in guilt or regret, but in fear. She hadn't expected me to still be standing. She hadn't expected witnesses. And most of all, she hadn't expected the one thing she could never control. The live stream. Megan's friend hadn't stopped it. It was still running, broadcasting everything. I turned my head slightly and saw someone holding up their phone whispering, "Someone just got assaulted on this live stream. I'm calling the police." Within minutes, the comments section exploded. She hit her with a glass jar? That woman is bleeding. This is a felony. Who is that woman? Call the cops now. And they did. 10 minutes later, flashing lights poured through the large glass doors of the venue. A pair of police officers entered first. Officer Davis leading the way, his voice firm. Everyone stepped back. Who's the victim here? Before anyone could answer, I raised my hand, blood still seeping through my hair. Right here, I said steadily. And it was my mother who did it. Gasps echoed. Megan stepped forward, stammering. She didn't mean to. It was just emotions, Officer Davis cut her off. Miss, we saw the video. It's already being forwarded around. Please don't interfere. Behind him, 2 EMTs rolled in with a stretcher. One of them gently approached me, checking my pupils, asking questions. I answered calmly, without tears. I wanted every second of this to be clear, deliberate, documented. Possible concussion, one paramedic said. We need to take her in. Head trauma, with visible bleeding. As they helped me onto the stretcher, Patricia tried to speak. Brooke, please, we didn't mean for it to go this far. I looked at her. No anger in my eyes, just icy clarity. You meant every word, every bruise, every silence. And now you'll face the consequences. Officer Davis stepped forward and addressed her. Patricia, you're under arrest for aggravated assault with a deadly object. He turned to my father, Mark, who had remained silent in the back, but was now rushing forward. Wait, officer, this is just family drama. You can't arrest a mother for one mistake. Davis's voice didn't waver. Sir, witnesses confirm that you verbally supported the attack and made no effort to stop it. You're being charged as an accessory to assault. Megan's eyes widened. She tried to walk away. And you, Officer Davis said, will be charged with inciting public harm and verbal harassment based on the live footage. You knew what your mother was about to do. This is insane, she yelled. She ruined the shower. I turned my head slightly on the stretcher.
No, Megan.
You ruined this the moment you decided I didn't matter. Now you'll remember this party forever. As I was wheeled out, 3 members of my family were being handcuffed, publicly in front of their friends, their community, and the internet. The guests stood frozen. Some were crying. Others were still filming. And me? I was finally leaving with something they couldn't take away.
Power.
The emergency room was cold, sterile, and strangely quiet. I lay on a hospital bed with a dull throb pulsing at the crown of my head, where the crystal jar had struck. A nurse gently wiped the dried blood from my hairline as a doctor explained that the wound didn't need stitches, but I had a mild concussion and would need rest, monitoring, and no stress. I almost laughed at the last part. No stress. I muttered. That's like telling a firefighter to avoid heat. The nurse smiled softly. But deep down, I wasn't joking. This wasn't just a physical injury. It was the visible mark of a lifetime of emotional wounds that had finally broken the surface. For years, they'd taken from me love, money, dignity, then discarded me when it was convenient. Now they'd done it in front of a crowd. On video. And that video was everywhere. By the next morning, the live stream had been clipped, shared, and reposted across social media. I had strangers messaging me, some in shock, others in support. Saw the video. You're so brave. I hope you press charges. How can someone's own mother do that? I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need applause. I needed justice. When I was discharged 2 days later, I didn't go home to rest. I went straight to the office of Mr. Bennett, my attorney. He greeted me with the kind of look you only get after something traumatic, a mix of caution, concern, and readiness. Brooke, he said, gesturing toward the seat, I've already been contacted by Officer Davis. The charges are holding. But if you want to pursue this further, we'll need to move quickly. I nodded. I was ready. I want to file full charges against all 3 of them, I said without hesitation. Not just for the assault, but for everything. He raised an eyebrow. Everything. Yes, I replied. Financial exploitation, emotional abuse, public humiliation, and yes, felony assault with a weapon. He leaned back, clearly impressed. All right, he said, grabbing a pen. Let's build your case. Over the next few days, we gathered everything. Screenshots of the exclusion messages, bank records of all the payments I'd made, of vehicle lease documents showing I had co-signed for the SUV, footage of the live stream, my hospital report, even photos of the lake house used and abused. Mr. Bennett assembled it like a prosecutor building a high-profile case. And when it was done, he filed 3 separate legal actions. Case 1, Patricia Mother. Charges: aggravated assault with a deadly object, public violence, and long-term emotional manipulation. Penalty requested: 4 years prison, no parole, full restraining order. Case 2, Mark Father. Charges: accessory to assault, verbal abuse, enabling harm, and financial coercion. Penalty requested: 2 years prison plus 300 hours of community service. Case 3, Megan's sister. Charges: inciting public harm, deliberate emotional abuse, and live-stream defamation. Penalty requested: 18 months jail, $10,000 fine, no contact order. When the paperwork was filed and officially stamped by the court, I walked out of Mr. Bennett's office with a calm I hadn't felt in years. They had finally crossed the line, and I had finally drawn one of my own. For the first time, they weren't going to walk away from what they'd done. And not this time. The courthouse smelled like old wood and polished fear. I sat quietly on the left side of the courtroom, dressed in a navy blue suit and low heels, my hair pulled back from the fading wound near my temple. The lights above buzzed faintly, and every sound, the tapping of keys, the rustling of papers, the creak of chairs, seemed sharper than it should have been. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Across the aisle sat Patricia, Mark, and Megan, each in formal clothes that couldn't hide the tension in their shoulders. Their lawyer whispered to them, but none of them looked up at me. Not even once. I guess guilt makes you stare at the floor. The trial began with Officer Davis's testimony, followed by statements from the EMT who treated me, and then, finally, the live-stream video was played in court. It was surreal, watching myself on the giant screen as the footage captured every second. My speech, the candy jar, the moment it shattered across my head, the way I stumbled but didn't fall. Gasps filled the courtroom. The judge's face hardened. Then came my turn. I walked up to the witness stand, looked at the judge, then at the jury. And for the first time in a long time, I spoke my truth. "Your Honor," I said, voice steady. "That jar wasn't the first thing my family broke. They've been chipping away at me for years. But I stayed quiet because we're taught that blood means loyalty, that family deserves endless forgiveness. But I've learned something else." I paused, then locked eyes with Patricia. Family doesn't get to hurt you just because they gave you life. They don't get to bleed you dry financially, emotionally, and physically, and call it love. That wasn't love. That was control. And I'm taking that control back. The courtroom was still. Mr. Bennett gave his closing statement, summarizing the financial exploitation, public violence, and clear evidence of repeated emotional harm. The judge took it seriously, far more seriously than any of them had expected. 2 days later, the verdict came down. Patricia, mother guilty. Sentence: 4 years in state prison. The notes: no parole, permanent restraining order issued. She sobbed as they led her away in cuffs. The same hands that had once wiped my tears were now shackled behind her back. Mark, father guilty. Sentence: 2 years in prison plus 300 hours community service. Notes: Judge noted his willful neglect and verbal abuse. He didn't cry. He didn't even look surprised. Just defeated, like a man who finally realized silence has a price. Megan's sister guilty. Sentence: 18 months in county jail plus $10,000 restitution. Notes: barred from contacting me in any form, social or illegal. She didn't cry either. She just glared at me like I'd stolen something from her. But the truth was, I'd only taken back what was mine. As I walked out of the courtroom, reporters outside asked questions I ignored. I didn't need to tell the world what had happened. They'd already seen it. And, more importantly, now they believed it. That evening, I went home, turned off my phone, and opened the windows. The autumn breeze carried in a quiet that felt earned. For the first time, my world wasn't spinning in reaction to someone else's chaos. It was mine.
Still.
Safe. And the war that had lived in my chest for years? It was finally over. 2 weeks after the sentencing, I stood on the back porch of the lake house, my lake house, for the last time. The breeze rolled softly over the water, rippling across the surface like it had a secret to tell. But there were no secrets left in my life anymore. No more unspoken pain. No more silent expectations. The property sold faster than I expected, above asking price. I used the profit to clear the remaining debts on my condo and invest in a new home in a quiet town, far away from West Haven. Somewhere with fresh starts and no shadows. Before I left, I walked through the lake house one last time. Every corner echoed memories I hadn't agreed to, dishes I hadn't used, Trash I hadn't left. Parties I hadn't been invited to, despite footing the bills. I smiled at the silence.
It was peaceful now.
Not because it had always been, but because I'd made it that way. I moved within a week. My new place was smaller, modern, and tucked into a neighborhood filled with strangers who didn't know my name, and for the first time, that felt like freedom. I blocked all three of them, Patricia, Mark, and Megan, on every platform. Changed my number. Canceled any shared accounts. It was over. But the journey didn't end there. I started seeing a therapist, someone who helped me untangle the damage they'd buried inside me for years. I learned that my worth wasn't tied to what I gave. That being a good person didn't mean being a doormat. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't selfish. I was finally free. One morning, as I sat in a sunlit corner of my new kitchen sipping coffee, an envelope slid through the mail slot. No name on the outside. Just my address in a familiar hand. I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter from Megan's husband, Josh. Brooke, I know I've never been in the middle of your family's mess, and I tried to stay out of it. But I want you to know, I watched that video 100 times. And I'm sorry for not saying something sooner. For not speaking up when they were using you. Megan still doesn't understand what she did. But I do. I hope someday you find peace. And if our child ever asks why they don't know their aunt, I'll tell them the truth. I read it twice, then folded it, tucked it into the back of a drawer, and walked away. Closure doesn't always come with tears or forgiveness. Sometimes it comes with a letter and a closed drawer. Weeks passed, then months. I filled my days with work, long walks, cooking again, reading books that made me cry for the right reasons. I joined a local nonprofit as a financial advisor, not because I had to, but because I chose to. Helping people who wanted help, not just to take, but to grow, felt like breathing fresh air. No guilt. No obligation. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the trees outside my window, I looked at my reflection and whispered, "You did it." Not because I had won in court, not because they were behind bars, but because I had finally chosen me. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think about the meaning of self-worth and boundaries, please take a moment to like this video. Your support helps us share more powerful stories like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been used by people who claim to love you? What would you have done in Brooke's place? Let us know below. And if you enjoy real, emotional, and justice-filled stories, don't forget to subscribe for more. New content drops every week, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay strong, stay kind, and choose yourself.